just to kick off, I've been reading your stuff about your international beach soccer playing, Gareth.
Yeah.
You want to tell us a bit about that? That's interesting for me.
Yeah, it's a weird one because I played football for a few years, same as so my dad was a pro, and then I played football, and my brother played football. But I had a bone wasting disease as a kid, something called Perthes disease. So basically the ball of my hip kind of turned to mush.
My brother did, yeah.
He was an 80s thing. You don't hear of it anymore, Perthes disease.
Yeah, he was.
So in the 80s.
73.
Yeah,
like that.
I don't know what that's all about, but you don't hear of it anymore anyway. So I had like multiple surgeries and stuff. So I was at Portsmouth Football Club, when they were a centre of excellence before they became an academy and got in the Premier League and all that kind of stuff. But obviously you're never going to pass a medical with that in your history. So I kind of sacked off football and just played in bands and didn't really want to know about football, to be honest. And then I was out drinking one night and these guys came up and they were like, you used to play football. You played in goal, didn't you? And I was like, yeah, a long time ago. They said, we've got a beach soccer game tomorrow. And obviously because I had a few beers, you say yes to anything, didn't you? I went, all right, yeah, sound.
Yeah.
So then forgot about it. And so the next morning, my sister came around banging on the door. You got a beach soccer match? I was like, what? So you agreed to it last night? I went, oh, no, here we go. So anyway, I played well and I actually really enjoyed it. And then what happened in that couple of weeks, the England international team was away travelling around Europe and someone knocked over a coffee machine, right? And the coffee machine's gone down and it's landed on the keeper's toe and basically pretty much severed it, right? So that means the sub-goalie's got to go in goal and they need a sub-goalie. But obviously, because you're not getting paid to play beach soccer, you can't just call on anyone because they can't get out of work. But I've always worked for myself. So I got a phone call, can you be in Marseille next week? And I said, well, who's paying? And they said, well, we will. I went, yeah, I'll be there then. So I went, just to sit on the bench, which I did for the first game. And then the keeper ended up getting vertigo. And so kind of halfway through the second game, we're playing against Greece, and he starts doing that. But the game's on the telly. It's on Eurosport. So I know like my mum and dad are watching it, basically just to see me sat twiddling my thumbs. And he starts doing that. And I was like, oh, hang on. Oh, mate, I'm coming on. And then it all got real. So I came on, and I'm one of those people that's like, if I'm in for a penny, in for a pound, basically. If I'm in a situation, I may as well have it. So within about 30 seconds of being on the pitch, this guy, Stevarakis, who's playing for Greece, I think he used to play for Palace. He used to play in the Premier League anyway. He hits a shot. I tell you what, mate, I felt it whistle past my ear, but I didn't even see it. And then I heard the bang of the post and it came flying back out again. I was like, right, okay, this is the level I'm playing at now. And I didn't even see that. A couple of minutes later, they get a penalty. It's 0-0 at this point, but England are getting battered. And so I just walked out to him and I just said, you're going down there? And he looked at me like, what? I went, you're going down there? And I just sort of stood back in the goal, and he did go there, and I saved it. And it literally flipped the whole game then, and England won 4-0. And then I played for England for 5 years, yeah. It was mad. All came from agreeing to something drunk in a Wetherspoons.
Wow, that's brilliant.
So there you have it, yeah. Strange one.
That's a great story.
So when did music come into your life then, Gareth?
Do you know what? From like probably about the age of 15, 16, I wanted to be Kurt Cobain, so I had like the long blonde hair and nail varnish and eyeliner, all that gubbins. And then, I didn't get a guitar till I was about 18, 19 though. I was into music, wasn't bothered about playing it so much as looking like Kurt Cobain, basically. But and then just kind of started writing songs, and I found that was quite a good way to just get a bit of angst out. Do you know what I mean? Rather than, because I'm growing up on the Isle of Wight, rather than becoming a smackhead, it was like, I'll just, start writing songs, and it gets me off the Isle of Wight, which it did for years. Again, like, I think it was 5 years. Only I seem to do things for 5 years, apparently. Sorry, mate. We did about 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off in a band, touring for about 5 years. It was pretty intense.
Yeah.
Dreadful for your liver. Because obviously you're on tour, so every day's a Friday night, even if it's a Tuesday. But if you're playing at an SU bar in Lincoln, it's Saturday night, isn't it? So, and then whenever you go back to the Isle of Wight, having been away for sort of 4 weeks, it was like, I've not seen my mates for a month.
Yeah.
Let's all go down the pub.
It's like a different world when you get back, because everyone's in their own little bubble.
Yeah.
You've just come back from this mental time, really.
Well, it's interesting because like it went both ways. Like some people would be well up for hanging out and having a beer and tell us about it. So where have you been this time? Like genuinely like interested in what you've been doing.
Yeah.
And others, which would be jealousy basically, would be like, it's time to get a proper job. It's time to get a,
God.
and it's like, what is a proper job? Because you're an estate agent, or you're working for an estate agent. You're getting paid on commission. So every month end is that desperate clamber to try and get enough in.
Yeah.
And I'm skint, but I've spent the afternoon sat on the River Dee in Chester drinking beer before a gig. So it's like,
I know which one I'd rather do.
yeah, that's it, isn't it? I don't, that whole, it's time to grow up. I never really go for that, really. I mean, I get that it's time to take responsibility. That I get.
Yeah.
But I don't understand that you're at this age now. This is what you do.
You've got to do this or do
Yeah.
that. It's not,
Who says? I don't understand that.
it's conditioning, isn't it? I mean, that's just how we've been conditioned to be.
Yeah, and so many people, that's what they do. And I know people like that. I know lots of people like that. And they aged overnight as a result of it.
Yeah.
Like, I'll go back to the Isle of Wight, if I go back and visit, and I'll see people that I went to school with, and they'll sort of shout out of a car and beep and wave, and I'll go, all right. And like my wife, who's a bit younger than me, she'll be like, who's that? And I'm like, oh, he was in my school year. She's like, no chance. I'm like, yeah, you married an old guy. They do. But that is not anything other than, I think, at least, because to be fair, my granddad did it, my mum's dad. He hit 50 and went, I'm old now. And that was it. And then so you become it.
Yeah.
You become old. And I'm like...
It's like the old story about people, what you should do and what you shouldn't. The old Greek fisherman was sat tending his nets, and this shipping magnate pulls up on the beach and says, why don't you get yourself another couple of boats? What you're doing, you've got one boat, get another few, and then what? And then get 20 boats, and it goes on, this story. And he says, and then what do I do? And it's like 25 years down the line, he's explaining, expand. And he says, and then you can retire and come back, get your own boat on the beach and go fishing. You know what I mean? We've been conditioned to be like that. It's all bullshit, really.
It's total bullshit. But do you know what I've found, though, after all these years, is it's like, you're all right while you're striving for that.
Yeah.
So if you're striving for that, you become a tomorrow man, and it's like, do you know what I mean? Next week, next year, like Del Boy, this time next year we'll be millionaires, and but actually once you get it and you realise that it's all bollocks, that's the darkest part for me. Like, because after years of doing music and football and all this sort of stuff, I've met quite a few very wealthy people over the years in these different realms. I've never met a happy one. I've literally never met a happy one.
Yeah.
They're all as miserable as sin, and you're looking at them like, but I think it's because they've strived for something that's going to make them happy. They've got it, realised it doesn't, nowhere to go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in business myself a long time, and as you say, you're always striving. You always think, want to make this, want to do this. But I always enjoyed myself at the same time. I wasn't one of these people who just let business rule their life, and I could probably made a lot more money if I was like that. But the happiest time of my life, my business life, was when I could pack in and say, and people were asking me to do stuff, and I could say no. Yeah. I'm not bothered. I'm not bothered about doing that no more. You know what I mean? Because most people get in a situation with business where they've got to take work on, because that's how these big companies get small business people, because they keep throwing work at you until you're in their pocket then, and they owe you that much money. You've got to take the next job on, whether you like it or not, and it's the trap, innit?
Most people just can't say, I've got enough. I don't need a bigger whatever.
Yeah. That's it.
Chill out type thing.
I say no more now than I ever did to stuff. Because it's just like, now I've got strict rules when it comes to my kids. Like, I'm going to be there for school pickup, school drop off and things like that.
Yeah.
Because when we had our firstborn, my wife had to obviously quit teaching because she was, just had a baby. And so I was working all day, but I was personal training in the evenings as well, just trying to make ends meet. And I missed like first steps, first words, like freaking lot. I was getting like messages from my wife, like, oh, she's done this today. It's like, I'm there like that. It's another one missed. And I swore I'd never do it again. So with our second child, like she's 2.5 now, I've literally been there for all of it.
So obviously, Gareth, you got like massively famous father. How did that influence you growing up on how you are today?
It's a weird one, because because I was only young, to go from being wherever you went, like these are days before camera phones, obviously, but wherever you went, some people would want to shake his hand or get an autograph or whatever. Like, you know, Dad's a legend on the BBC or whatever, to basically being laughed at and shouted at in the street. And it seemed to happen in the space of about 45 seconds. So as a kid, that's quite confusing, because it's like, oh, hang on a minute, I don't really understand. And they tried the best to shelter all of us, really, from that kind of rubbish as it went off. But, you know, it wasn't nice getting stick as a kid. Not nice at all. And the weirdest thing for me now as an adult is that the things that the kids were saying was coming from the newspapers, and kids don't read newspapers, which means it was coming from the parents.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, like my daughter goes to school with people with disabilities, people that have, you know, family members with drug problems that you see at the school gate and all that kind of stuff. And that's like me saying to my little one, oh, you know that kid in your class, you know their dads are blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
The idea of doing that is mad to me. But obviously these parents were doing that. So that was very strange. And then, but it gave me an eye into the media as well. You know, like the tabloids were offering my poor friends' parents, not my wealthy friends' parents, but my poor friends' parents money to say bad things about our family, which they all refused to do, which, you know, one particular friend of mine, like his family had nothing, like less than nothing. So for them to turn down big money was incredible. So that gave me a bit of an eye into just what these people are willing to do to, you know, to screw people over, basically. And now I'm 42 and I'm, you know, gobbing off about the COVID stuff and all this sort of thing. And I look back and I think that was just basic training, that taking all that abuse, taking all that crap, realizing that actually it's just words, man. It don't mean out. You know, if I hadn't had that, would I have stood on a stage at Trafalgar Square in front of tens of thousands of people? Probably not. To be fair, I don't think.
Yeah. That's where I first come across you. I was in Trafalgar Square that day when you did your speech, and it inspired me. It were good. It were really good.
Thanks.
Your dad spoke that day, didn't he?
Yeah.
You did. There was a fella from a Geordie fella was talking about the 5G stuff that day.
Oh, Mark Steele, that'd have been.
Mark Steele.
Yeah.
Because I was just getting into all this at the moment, what's going off in our world, you know what I mean? I'd always been a bit sceptical of certain stuff, and but that really made me start researching and how we were just put down, how the people were being put down at that stage.
It was a turning point, that Trafalgar Square, though, because I'd been going around the country. I'll be honest, right? I never thought I'd be giving speeches. It wasn't anything I wanted to do, really. But I got asked to speak in Birmingham, and it's quite funny because where I run my dad's stuff, that all the emails come through to me. So I was getting an email to try and get Dad booked for this Birmingham protest. Yeah. And Dad was speaking at another protest that day. So I said, oh, you know, I'm really sorry. I can't remember where he was, but he was somewhere else down south. And so then I got an email then to me just saying, you know, we've identified you as like the main person we want to speak. Obviously not realising that I'm the one that's answered the email saying that they want Dad. But do you know what I mean? I just thought, no, I need to do something. I need to get out there and do something. And because I was saying stuff vocally, obviously, on social media, and I was getting private messages from friends that were going, mate, I'm with you, but I can't say it because I'll lose my job.
Exactly.
X, Y, and Z. So it kind of became a bit more of almost an obligation then. It's like, well, actually, okay, well, I've got to shout louder because I work for myself. I can't sack myself, so I'll just shout louder then. So I ended up giving this speech in Birmingham, and it went all right, and it seemed to, you know, resonate with people. And I thought, all right, maybe this is what I can do then, to try and do something. So then I was just travelling around the country, but you know, it wasn't quite one man and a dog, but it wasn't far off. And I remember being one in London, and I think it was like 600 people. I think it was Hyde Park. It was about 600 people, and within a month and a half, it was 40,000. It just literally, it popped. Yeah. Where I think so many people had already been sceptical, because I think you know when you're being lied to. I think inherently we kind of, you know, we've all had it. Maybe you go to a pub and one of your mates comes along and he's like, oh, this is Dave, I work with Dave. All right, Dave, nice to meet you. And Dave's chatting away, but when he leaves, you go, that Dave guy's full of shit, isn't he? but you don't know he's full of shit, but it resonates that he's a bullshitter. And so, you know, I think a lot of people were looking at those 5 p.m. briefings and looking at Johnson and going, I'm being lied to here, and they don't quite know why or how or in what level, you know.
Yeah.
So I think by that point of Trafalgar Square, I think you had 10% of people kind of knew what was going on and were being vocal about it, and you had 10% of people maybe that would just, mate, they'd buy an inflatable dartboard off you if you tried to sell it to them. They're just that gullible. But then there was that big, huge 80% that was just like, something ain't right. And so they started to come over at that point.
That day, I thought that was amazing, that day when you did that speech in Trafalgar Square. And they had a march after. I didn't go on the march. I went to the pub on the corner of the square, like a lot of other people did. And I met people from all over the place, and including a lot of young people who, because we were being made to believe that young people just weren't interested in this. They were just getting on with everything. And we met some lads from Birmingham, and we were only like early 20s. And they were like all over everything, do you know what I mean? And there were a couple of young lasses who were nurses. They come and sat with us, and they were telling us stuff that was, they knew what was happening in the hospitals that they worked, and it wasn't as we was being told. And it was just so inspiring that day that everybody was so friendly and so together. It just created a whole new type of people for me.
Yeah, it did. Those protests and then the stand in the park things that came after that, mate, they saved people's lives, man. Like 100%, hands down, they did. Because I was getting messages from people, left, right, and centre, emails from people that had, like, everyone at work thought they were mental, their husband thought they were mental, you know, the friend thought they were a granny killer. They'd like sort of lost everyone, really. Yeah. And so then, you know, they'd come to this protest. And, you know, they'd say, you know, are you going to be there, whatever? And I'd be like, yeah. And I'd sort of always loiter around the same sort of places before. And so they'd come and seek you out, and you'd end up chatting to them. So like, I've seen you on social media. So they'd stand with you, you'd chat, you'd introduce them to 2 or 3 other people, and then you'd go off on your separate ways. And then 2 weeks later at the next protest, they'd walk past you and you go, all right. And they'd be walking with like 20, 30 people from their town that they've now built this. You know, we've got a group now. We meet up every Sunday. And it's like amazing. I was getting it all the time. People sending me private messages. Great what you're putting on Facebook, this, that, and the other. But the same people, they wouldn't like your post or comment on it. It's just people were scared of ridicule, scared of, you know, whatever. Like it could be their jobs or whatever. But I can't help speaking out. If I feel something's wrong, I've got to say it's wrong. And I've always been that way.
Your press has got to be really positive, though, hasn't it, at the moment? I mean, when people get in touch with you.
It's a weird one, really, because what I've found is actually, you know, because people don't necessarily realise that everything's connected to everything else, they will go, I mean, I had it as soon as, you know, the Ukraine kicked off, and I was speaking out about that, and they were like, no. I followed you and what you were saying through COVID, but you're bang wrong on this. This is bang out of order. Block.
Yeah, exactly. I got the same with Ukraine. Exactly the same.
Okay, mate. And then the same with climate change. And that one staggers me because it's literally the same people that sold you Rona. Like it's literally the same people, the same faces, the same organisations that are telling you this, that you know and protested against lying to you about this. Like that I do find kind of staggering. So actually, it's funny. There's people that are agreed with you and aligned with you on certain things, and then you say one thing. Israel's another one. Like the amount of messages I got after speaking out against Israel. Like Israel's the end-of-level boss, man. It's like Dr. Robotnik in Sonic the Hedgehog. It's like you can talk about everything, and then you suddenly get to that. It's like, oh no, you don't go there.
You can't speak about Israel.
Well, I want to talk about it more. Then that's the point. You tell me I can't talk about it.
You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to. It's crazy that. You can argue all day about Gaza and this, that, and the other, but you can't mention Israel as though they're not part of it all.
That's the thing. And what's staggering to me about that and people's blind support for especially in the so-called freedom movement, the blind support of Israel and Netanyahu's government is like that dude literally sold his whole population to Pfizer as lab rats. And he even used that term in a live interview. That his population was lab rats. And it's like, so hang on a minute. Like, you know this guy's a wrong'un. But they've done very well in terms of taking a real issue, which is mass immigration, and basically vilifying a certain demographic. So you have people now within the freedom movement that will say things like all lives matter, whereas they don't actually mean that. They mean that at all. And so as soon as something like, October 7th happens, then that, instead of being something as a result of an occupation, and let's have it right, Israel allowed it to happen, you go, oh yeah, Muslims are this, Muslims are that, Muslims are that. And it's like, there's lots of people, I think, that don't like Muslims, and they would love to be able to say it, but they can't say it. And then October 7th happened, and they went, oh, yeah. Let's open that laptop, bosh, because I can say things and pretend I have a moral superiority, which is, they must have loved that. But you can see through it because it's so obvious.
Yeah. It, like you say, everything is connected, everything. And you go through your whole list of your CBDCs, your 15-minute cities, just keep going, and they all link up somewhere or another.
Of course they do. And it's two things: less money, less freedom. That's the answer to every single problem that's created. Yeah. Whether it be, climate change, all of a sudden you've got to have ULEZ. You're going to move into these 15-minute cities, smart cities, get people off the land, rewilding, which is just another way of saying we're just going to destroy the food supply. And it's, we shouldn't be flying. Like this Boeing thing feels like kind of a bit of a psyop to me as well. Well, basically, a guy's come out, said that they cut corners left, right, and centre in terms of the safety of the aeroplanes, which wouldn't surprise me.
So you had the door blow off, the window blow out, didn't it?
Yeah, it wouldn't shock me at all that they do cut corners. But then all of a sudden, this whistleblower kills himself, and he probably doesn't kill himself, but that then gives more credence to everything he's been saying. So how many people are now going to go, well, I ain't flying. I know what these planes are like in terms of how they're cutting corners. I ain't flying. So that's another, nail in the coffin of air travel, which they don't want us to do. So all of a sudden, if you're not allowed to fly, well, you're limited as to where you can go. And like I say, every little thing, whether it be a war, whether it be a pandemic, whether it be climate change or whatever, it's like, just give us a little bit more money and a little bit more of your freedom, and that will sort the problem out. And then you create another problem. And you do that enough times.
Well, you're Les. I mean, how can paying a tax make the air cleaner?
But that's the point, isn't it?
Do you know what I mean? You can still go in there in your big diesel truck as long as you give us some money.
Well,
so how can that be about the clean air?
I've never understood that. You had Al Gore winning an Oscar, and he deserved it because he was good at acting. But for An Inconvenient Truth, and at the time he was heavily invested in companies that were supplying carbon credits. I mean, the dude's became a billionaire, I think, as a result of it. It's such a scam.
Well, that's the next big money maker, selling carbon credits.
Yeah,
it's without a doubt that's going to be massive in the next few years. But me or you aren't going to be able to sell them. It's going to be all your usual suspects who's going to be selling these carbon credits.
Of course, yeah. And they've done a good job in terms of what they've done is they've conflated environment with climate, which is not the same thing. So therefore you get a lot of people which are correct in saying, we need to not pollute the rivers. We need to, not stick plastic in the ocean and all this kind of stuff. But then that then just gets lumped into this whole green movement where it's talking about climate. It's like the two things are not the same. If I dump a load of plastic bags in the ocean, the world isn't going to boil. The two are not necessarily connected, but they connect them. They call it environment and climate, and it's like, oh yeah, it's the same thing, and it's not. This whole idea that we're in global boiling. I mean, what a load of nonsense! Such nonsense. But it's that whole thing again of fear, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you think what freedoms they managed to take off people for fear of, even if you believe in the bloody thing, a virus that's basically not going to kill you for 99.9% of the population. What they managed to get people to give away for 4 years for that. Imagine what they can get people to give away if they're threatening the end of the world.
Today, I've heard the news this morning. It was on the radio when we was on our way up here, Luke. Prince William is creating this thing to stop homelessness during COVID, there was no one on the streets. We took them all off the streets and put them in homes, didn't we, somewhere? And then as soon as we come out of these crazy lockdowns and that, they're back on the streets. Well, if we could stop them being on the streets then, why does it need Prince William to do it now?
It's the same as you know, if you can house migrants in hotels, then why can't you house homeless people in hotels?
Absolutely.
I remember that viral image of a load of immigrants in a migrant hotel. I think it was in Blackpool, and there's like two British guys asleep, homeless in the doorway of this hotel, and you're like,
Yeah.
this is insane. Why is one life more important than another? But you know, there is, I think, a desire to have a demographic change and also a change of culture to create, you know, disharmony. I think it's happening. It's happening in major cities, and so therefore, because that's part of the agenda, that the money's found and the hotels are found for that. That's fine. Getting these two homeless guys a room, that's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. And so, you know, Sodom, and that's, you know, you can just see it happening, especially in cities. I mean, I moved out of Derby. Thankfully, I don't live in the city anymore. But I saw the demographic change and the cultural change, and actually, it was causing massive disharmony within other groups of immigrants. Yeah. It actually wasn't really causing that much friction with what you would call the native, for want of a better phrase, the native population. And so I was working at Virgin, active as a PT at the time, and I was training people from all different backgrounds, and they were all different countries, and they were all bitching about how these people have been allowed to come in here. And I'm looking at them thinking, you did it about 15 years ago, mate. But it just creates, again, this disharmony. So like my brother's wife was working at a school and it was all immigrants in the school, basically, where they were staggering drop off and pick up, because if certain groups or certain people from different countries would meet at the same time, there'd be fights in the playground between parents, and you're just like, what the hell? But then you think, if your goal is order out of chaos, well, then the chaos is great, isn't it? Because then what happens is, you know, you create a situation, whether it be financial chaos or actual just bloody lawlessness, and you know, and everyone's terrified. And who do people look to save them? They'll look to the state. Please save us, and the state will go, well, actually, now you mention it, I have got this idea, and it just happens to be one they've had the whole time. So I think with, you know, you look at the mass immigration. They've wanted ID cards and, you know, electronic ID and all this kind of stuff. They've wanted that for a very long time. You know, Tony Blair was trying to push those ID cards the whole time he was in office, and people pushed back against it. But you allow a load of people in where you don't know where they are, where they're from in terms of their mental state, their background in terms of, are these people pedophiles or rapists, or, you know, you don't know who these people are. Create a situation where there's friction with the locals. House a load of them opposite a primary school just to really get the locals wound up, you know, and create a situation where this happens. And then the locals will go, we need ID cards. We need to know who these people are. We need to know and they go, well, if you want it, all right, we'll give it to you. Yeah. And I think that's where we'll go.
Oh, it's the old story of government, isn't it? Create a problem and then find us the solution.
Yeah.
So that's exactly what they're doing with all this, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think that's the first time I heard your dad actually say that: problem, reaction, solution. That was, 25 years ago.
That's it. The solution is like Blue Peter. Here's one I made earlier. It's there. They know what they want, and once you know that, you kind of know where they're going with it. Then you can just see the steps that they're taking to do it and how they're going to achieve it. And it's like, you know, with the universal basic income, with the whole WEF, you will own nothing and you'll be happy. You'll have no privacy, you'll own nothing, you'll be happy. And you look at that and you go, well, that's nonsense. People won't go for that. Yeah. So, well, you create enough of a problem, people will beg you for that. And I say to people, like, if I went up to someone and I said, you know what, sign your house over to me. You can have it, like you can live in it with your family, not a problem, but I'll own the deeds to your house. You tell me to jog on. But if I create a situation where you are screwed financially. You can't keep up with the mortgage repayments. You know, the bailiffs are at the door coming to take your telly, coming to take your kids' Xbox and all stuff like that. And then I come back to you and I say, look, sign over your house to me. I'll own the deeds. You won't own it, but you can live in it and you can keep everything in here. I'll get rid of the bailiffs for you. Don't you worry about that. How many people would go,
Yeah.
there you go.
Absolutely.
So
And
you own
that-
nothing, you're happy.
And I think that's people like BlackRock, Vanguard, and that's what they're doing. They're buying that many properties up, and then that'll just continue. And all your big corporations will take properties on, and the banks, they'll take properties on, and then everybody will end up renting.
Well, I had it. Like, so we've lived where we live now for about 18 months, just over 18 months. And so we were living in this little terraced house. It was said 2-bedroom, but it wasn't really. Like, it was a bedroom and a box room. And so Little had the box room, me and my wife had the normal sized bedroom. And then when we had another child, it was like, we can't live like this. Like, I'd already converted the loft by this point and it still wasn't enough room. So it's like, right. So we put the house on the market and I had 2 offers immediately from hedge funds, asking price. And it was just a letter, it said British Housing something, and then the other one was something different, can't remember, we'll buy your house. And because obviously I'm sort of look into sort of this kind of stuff, I was just like, nah. My wife was obviously like, what is that about? I was like, it will be the banks, it will be them buying it up, it will be them buying up property that then they'll then rent out. You do that enough times and all of a sudden you own a large portion of the market, you know. So I refused, just ignored the letters and ended up selling it for a little bit more because I'd done quite a bit of work on the house. But then I was thinking, you know, how many people asking price, bosh. Yeah. And so then, like I say, they then rent that out. And in the end, you know, private ownership, they don't want private ownership of cars either. They want private ownership of anything. You know, it's that mad world of, you know, having things delivered to your house by drone when you need them. And people laugh about it. It's like, no, they've said that. They've literally stated that's what, you know, you don't own anything, you rent everything you need.
Which Amazon will play a big part. And again, where you say everything's linked, you go, look who's buying all the farmland in America.
Yeah.
There's Bill Gates, is it Bezos, Jeff Bezos, who's Amazon man. They're like now, I don't know if they are the 2 biggest or certainly 2 of the biggest farm owners.
Yeah,
farmland
Bezos,
owners.
he owns the most land, but I think, what's his face? Bill Gates owns the most farmland.
Yeah. I think he's the biggest independent owner, isn't he, of farmland in the United States. It's just happening all over. And, you know, you can just see it, the way it's playing out, that it's intentionally being done, that you will just say you will own nothing. And I think, you know, that's what I felt that the track and trace was about. You know, they spent billions on track and trace and all that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, they've spaffed that up the wall. It's like, I don't think they did.
No.
I think they've built something. And we'll see
32
where that
billion,
goes.
was it? 32 billion. That just didn't disappear. Something's happened, hasn't it?
Yeah, they will have built something, some kind of infrastructure that will be brought in at some point.
I was in Barbados last year, and I noticed there's a massive, massive building. It's the United Nations building. So I thought, why is the United Nations building this massive building here in the middle of like nowhere in Barbados? The football was on. I was watching with this guy, and a mate of mine introduced me to this guy who worked down there at the United Nations, and he was a chauffeur. And he says, yeah, I've been taking people, I mainly take lawyers about from like the United Nations, the UN, WEF, WHO. And I says, I saw the United Nations building when I was doing a tour the other day. I didn't see like WEF and WHO buildings. Are they there as well? Just simple question. He went, well, you do realise they're all one organisation, don't you? And I said, what? How do you mean? He says, they're one organisation. They might have 3 names, but they're all one.
Yeah.
And he was telling me, he says they all live on this, I forget the name of this particular type of coffee. He says, and I said, what do you mean? He says, well, it's the most expensive coffee in the world. He says, and these lawyers who I'm running around.
It's not Maxwell House, is it?
They get they get an allowance for this coffee every month, and some of them are spending like $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a month on this coffee, and it's just to keep them going, like, because they're working all the hours God sends, and these top high flying lawyers. He says, and otherwise, he says they'll be burnt out in no time, and they're working for this organisation in Barbados, and he's running about, and he says some of the things I hear them talking about in the back of my car. He says it'd frighten people to death. But the interesting thing was, he says you do realise they're all one. Yeah. They're all one organisation.
Well, they all, and I think political parties are the same. Like they will argue and bicker about certain things, but then when there's the big things, they're always on the same page.
Yeah,
always on the same page. I look at COVID, and people will go, "Oh, still going on about Rona." It's like, because it was when they showed their hand for me. It was when, like, there's all this stuff. It's always been going on, but actually with COVID, they literally stuck it on a freaking billboard because they actually, I say to people, it's like, mate, they locked you in your house. You walked around Asda following arrows on the floor. How more obvious do you want it to be? So I think COVID's worth, talking about because of that. And, I think the fact that all those political parties were all completely aligned, and actually the so-called opposition in this country, I mean, his only question he asked was, why don't we lock down harder, wasn't it? I mean, exactly. It was, there was literally no alternative voice whatsoever within any political party.
Who do you think's at the pinnacle, the highest level?
I very much doubt it's anyone you can name, to be honest.
Yeah, I was thinking that.
I think, people will say people like Schwab and then on in other realms like your Epsteins and stuff like that. I don't think they're the head of the snake.
Yeah,
no. Even
the Rothschilds, even Rothschilds and Rockefellers, I think there's above them.
Oh, 100%. I think if you can name them and you can, Google them and find a Google image of them, they're probably not the head of the snake. No, I don't think so. Because why would you out yourself? I don't think I would. Because if people wake up to you, that's some hella wrath coming back off 7 billion people. I'm not sure I'd want them to know my address. I remember seeing a meme actually, and it was during the Rona, and it literally was just like a point of view of someone driving, and you just saw a cow, and it just said, I was going to say something, but it's 2020, innit? And it's like, it feels like that now.
Well, interesting. You said there's certain things that they have to tell you, and it has to come out. Saw an interview with him, Biden, last week or a week before, and can you remember all that houses that burnt down in Hawaii? And then there was speculation about certain ones not burning down with blue roofs. Did you come across that? And funny enough, Biden, in an interview the other week, he said, well, he was talking about stuff like that, and then he says, you have to have the right coloured roof. You know what I mean? And it's not a slip of the tongue, that, is it? There's something in there.
Fly over these areas that are burned to the ground, you'll see in the midst of 20 homes that are just totally destroyed, one home sitting there because it had the right roof on it.
He's a strange one. I don't know whether, like, he's being drugged or what, because there's sometimes, like, you can watch him and, he's sort of ish, compos mentis-ish. And then the next time you see him, like, you don't know what day it is.
No.
And he's, like, stumbling over words, falling off stage, turning around, shaking hands with people that aren't there.
It is weird, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, it's mad.
And like you say, some days he is talking in a half normal fashion.
George W. Bush was similar. Like, he would just sound like a complete ignoramus. And then the next time he'd talk, you go, what? He actually sounded normal then. It's almost like they've just flicked a switch or turned him off and then on again, and he'd be all right for a couple of days. Yeah. But I feel with America, like, well, actually, I feel like the West in general is just, they're taking the piss out of us, really. And you look at this, like, look at Great Britain. I mean, you've got an unelected Prime Minister, you've got obviously an unelected Head of State with Royal Family, you've got an unelected First Minister of Scotland, and I'm pretty sure you've got an unelected First Minister of Wales. Yeah. And you call yourself the mother of democracy. It means taking the piss. And I think, same with America. Biden in charge of America. Guy can't tie his own shoelaces. It takes the mick out of America, I think, and I think it takes the mick out of the American people, kind of in terms of that patriotism and that pride in your nation and getting behind your nation, that's diminished because you're just being led by a clown.
And bless him. He's a senile old.
Yeah. Well, he doesn't have to, it'd be the same when Starmer comes in, because I believe that he will be the next PM. That actually they don't have to play any lip service at all. Whereas Sunak has to pay a little bit of lip service to conservative-minded people, at least a bit. I mean, he doesn't really, but at least a little bit. Same with Trump or any Republican that gets in. They have to kind of pay a little bit of lip service to that base that elects them.
Yeah.
And so, they can't maybe push too much of the woke stuff. Whereas, as soon as Biden gets in, it's executive order after executive order. And it will be the same as soon as Starmer gets in. I mean, he's already bigging up ULEZ.
But are we heading towards a West against East conflict? Final conflict, if you like, where the East will win, and they're more conformant than Westerners, aren't they?
I think that's the plan, mate. Yeah, I think that that kind of war with Eurasia, that 1984 vibe. I think that's what they want. I think that's what they're gearing people towards. Yeah, and I agree. I don't think we're meant to win it. I don't think the West is meant to win this one. I think.
Well, the West, how the West is destroying itself at the minute, it can only be by plan.
Completely, yeah. I mean, even on such a small, well, not small level, but a smaller level, in terms of like our energy infrastructure. Like I go out and do all these walks down these colliery branches and all this kind of stuff. I on old railway lines. I love all that history. And I'm like, where I'm living in North Derbyshire, I'm not that far from the border with Nottinghamshire. And so you've got this huge coal field was sat on it. I live not too far from a freaking oil field, inland oil field in the UK.
Yeah.
Virtually untapped. And I talked to like some old coal miners and stuff, and I was saying to them, about these mines that closed, because there was like 49 in Nottingham, and they're all gone now. There isn't a single one now. And he's like, mate, he said, they hardly even touch that seam. Like it goes right out past Skeggy out into the North Sea. You've got, I think they estimate something like 185 billion tons. And that will be a conservative estimate, almost certainly, of coal that we're sat on. And so they've closed down all these mines. They've flooded a load of them. A load of them flood naturally, but they actually flood quite a lot of them as well. And then you're then dependent on Russian oil and gas. You're dependent on Poland for a lot of the coal you're getting. Why would you?
And China's still opening.
And China opens the equivalent of one new or two new coal plants a week.
Coal plants a week, yeah.
And you're like, yeah, I agree with you. Like that's not happening by accident, because it's so stupid that it's like anything, isn't it? You can make a mistake. A ball can come into the box and you can misjudge it, edit into your own net, score an own goal. It happens. You score 5 own goals in a game. I want to check his bank account.
Definitely.
It's like that, isn't it? And I feel like at the minute they're just hammering the ball into their own net, and you're like, I want to know what's going on here. I think, to be honest, I think the more people realise how it works and how they're being shafted, because I think half the time people either haven't realised that they think it's rain when they're being pissed on, but more and more people are realising now that actually no, that I am being shafted here, and also then when it affects them, that's when people start to actually sort of stand up, which I think it's frustrating. Because you take COVID, for example, if in March 2020 they'd said, right, we're shutting down your businesses, and everyone went, no, you're not. No fucking chance, mate. It would have been over in a day. But people gave them 3 weeks. And what it did is it told the government, I was saying it at Trafalgar Square, it told the government that those 3 weeks were theirs to take. And so they took more, and they took more, and they took more. And what we did as a population is we let the wolf into the porch, but said, oh yeah, but I won't let you in the lounge. It's too late now. Dude's in your house. And then you let him in your lounge. All right, you can come in the lounge, but you can't come in the kitchen. It's not how it works, mate. Once he's in your house, he's in the bedroom, he's in the loft, he's everywhere. And that's what, as a collective population, we did. We allowed the wolf in the house.
Yeah. I saw a tweet the other day on X. Somebody said, well, nobody forced you to take the vaccine. And I thought about that, and I thought, well, actually, you're right.
Didn't force you, coerced you.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. I'll give you an example of that. One of my businesses is in healthcare, and we got a letter saying all our staff had to have the vaccine, or by 1st of November, we had to sack him. That's what we got. So I says, I'm not doing that. I phoned my insurance company and I said, right, if one of my members of staff who the government are telling me I have to make them get the vaccine, otherwise I have to sack them. If they have that under my instruction and something goes wrong, am I covered for me insurance of my employees? We'll have to get back to you on that. I chased them 3 weeks before. Anyway, a lawyer from my insurance company, a big insurance company, phoned me back and said, right, we've looked into this for you. Basically, your staff, should your staff member have a reaction to the vaccine, and they'd have to, the person to sue would be the vaccine company and not you. I says, hang on, the vaccine company has been given immunity on these vaccines. So where do we go from there? Right, we'll have to come back to you again. So they went away again, they come back. Right, it's actually the person who administers the vaccine who you'd have to sue, who they'd have to sue. So some poor nurse and not just nurses, there was people volunteering to give these things, weren't they? So are they going to be sued for somebody? So who is going to take responsibility for that? I mean, I know the government are giving this compensation scheme of 120,000. What a load of bullshit that is. I mean, how does that cover somebody for losing their work life for the rest of their lives?
That's
some young person.
Well, if you're, you know, I know of people, I've interviewed people in this situation. You know, you're in a 50 grand a year job, which, you know, 50 grand a year is a lot of money, but not if you live in London. It's not, because everything costs an absolute fortune. So you as a result of a vaccine injury, you can't work again. So they're going to give you 120 grand. All right, so what's that going to do? It's cover you for just over 2 years. Now what?
Why are the people who are in charge, who told us all to do the right thing, have left us all to rot and left me and the thousands and the tens of thousands in this country to rot? Rishi Sunak, look me in the eye.
It's, you know, and that's covering you for a normal existence. That's not covering you for an existence where you have medical bills that you didn't have before and everything else. You know, it's a joke. Given the billions that these people have made, to throw 120k at someone who's lost everything, it's just takes the mick. You know, it's mad. I mean, it makes me think when I broke my leg in a football match. Because some guy went through me 2-footed and it was supposed to be insured through the FA. And I basically couldn't, I didn't play football for over a year. And luckily I could work from home like with a laptop, but I couldn't basically do anything really. And I got my compensation 6 months later. Guess how much I got? 104 quid. I put it behind the bar in the local pub. I just said to Graham, the landlord, I said, just get everyone who wants a beer to have a beer. Waste of time. 104 quid. 6 months later, from a leg flapping around like that. And you're like, it's almost a bit like that, really. You almost think, actually, why even bother? Yeah. Why even bother having a compensation scheme if you're not actually going to help people that desperately need it? The answer is because they don't care. That's the answer.
Yeah. And on the other end, you get Matt Hancock, who wrote a book, got the profits from that. Didn't he do the jungle thing?
Yeah. He's another one, though, where I think, you know, we were talking about the royals and the fact that you're meant to see stuff. You know, the fact that Midazolam story started to get a little bit, although I've got some interesting stuff about that, which was crazy. So we were offered that story along with 30 other publications in the UK. Pretty sure the Daily Mail came back. They published something on it, but it was a watered down version of the story about midazolam being used in care homes. I'm starting to talk about it a bit more now, but this was in the end of 2020, beginning of 2021. Their stance, I'm sure it was the Daily Mail. If it wasn't them, it was another one of the big UK papers. Their stance was, we will run this story, but someone else needs to break it. And you're like, that's not how it works. You used to be fighting over each other for the scoop. That's how it works, surely.
Yeah.
So we broke the story, but we weren't big enough for that to be. Oh no! I think their response to that was, we mean like a proper big mainstream person break it, not this prat in Derby. But we broke that story about Midazolam, and then it started to get out there a bit more. And then he did the London Marathon, and people were shouting Midazolam at him as he was running past. That was being caught on BBC.
Yeah.
So then people are going, Midazolam, what? Have a look. They started to do that. Then suddenly, cameras are facing the door, where he's snogging this lass right in front of the two cameras, caught red-handed, bang, he's out the way. And it's like, I think what you wanted to do was get him out of the firing line and bring in a new health secretary to sort of almost bury away this Midazolam thing. But you can't get rid of him based on Midazolam, because then you've got to talk about Midazolam. So get him to get off with this lass. Out you go. See you later. And that's what happens, exactly what happens.
See, Midazolam for me that's one of the biggest travesties of our time, certainly our lifetime, and everybody should be all over it.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's unbelievable. We did a Midazolam special, and I think I ended up talking to about 8 different people, and oh mate, I dread to think how many we could have done. We literally could have been there all day, just interviewing person after person after person. And then what came as a result of that was people watched other people's stories about how they were trying to kill in fact, they did kill a lot of these people. There was one person who they got their grandmother out. They managed to get her out of hospital and saved her. But the rest of them had lost loved ones as a result of this. And people watched it and they went, oh shit, I think that's what happened to my uncle. And so a lad I went to school with messaged me and he was like, I think that's what they did to me dad. Shit. So then he's obviously, pursued it. I'm not sure how far he's got with it. But so there was even more people then realised that actually, oh my God.
Midazolam was and is used as part of what is called end-of-life care. Precisely how and why it was prescribed during the past 3 years has preoccupied the minds of many people. Those whose loved ones were given Midazolam, in care homes especially, want to know more about how and why the decision was taken to prescribe that drug.
What's frightening for me in all that, with the Midazolam thing, is how many people, workers, just normal care workers in these care homes, who become complicit.
Oh yeah,
to murder, basically, possibly complicit to murder without even knowing it. And then how is that going to, when it all does come out, which it will eventually, how will that play on them people's minds? We think, well, Christ, I issued the Midazolam to them people. Do you know what I mean? How's that going to affect them eventually?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, you might find, much like with after the Iraq War, America lost more soldiers to suicide, depression after the Iraq War than they ever lost on the battlefield. And I do wonder, how people are going to, circle that square within their own mind when they realise that actually what they were complicit in, because I couldn't live with myself. It's honestly, people don't realise the level that kind of stuff went to. But what they did a great job of creating a golden calf with the NHS, though, having people outside banging their pots and pans at 8 p.m. They created a shield. And I add it that you said anything against the NHS, I mean, Jesus wept. I mean, that was, the rifles were out, which obviously, I couldn't give the monkeys, but lots of people could. And so they didn't say stuff. But, I've had experience within the NHS for a long time. I've had 8 surgeries. They also nearly blinded me once by just sheer negligence. So actually, I've kind of got a bit of a thing with the NHS that actually not all NHS workers are nice. Like any organisation, I've had some amazing doctors and nurses over the years, and I've had some absolute arseholes. And that's the same as any organisation. But you couldn't say that with the NHS because no, NHS is off limits. You can't talk about the NHS. And I say to people, the NHS doesn't give a shit about your health. You couldn't care less about your health at all. And the perfect example for that is look at what they feed you when you're in hospital.
Yeah.
That's how much they care about your health. Microwave shite that you don't want to even eat. Take a bite of it. Oh, I can't eat that. So you're in hospital trying to build your strength up and they're giving you like a pasty that's been under the bloody, underneath the light bulb for about 2 hours.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's just crap. And they couldn't give a monkeys about your health at all. like I say, there's some wonderful people that work within it, but as an organisation, I'm not a fan really.
Just find that as such a surreal time when I remember people all clapping on the doorsteps and whatnot. Just the level of acquiescing to these government people.
It was embarrassing. It was there was one woman.
It's like howling at the moon, isn't it?
Yeah.
People going outside their houses, clapping at what? What were they clapping at? It baffled me.
But it
hear
ended up having people bitching in local. I mean, I don't get involved in local Facebook groups or whatever. My wife does, but just to see what's going on, be a bit drunk, if I'm honest. But I don't bother. But where we lived in Derbyshire, in a village called Kilburn, I lived on this terrace street of old like miners' terraces, right? Yeah. And mate, 8 p.m. on the dot, right? Everyone is out banging their pots and pans and all this sort of stuff, right? And there's a lady opposite. She obviously hated me. She's out there. She's craning her neck, seeing who's not out, and then bitching on the Facebook group about, you know, Joan at number 52's not come out and all this sort of stuff. And so what I was doing, because I was bored out of my face and all the gyms were closed and all this sort of stuff, I started running, which I don't normally like. I'm bored running, if I'm honest. I'd rather play football and do running, but, you know, do something. But so I'd take me like headphones in, listening to podcasts and whatever, and I was out running. And so I was doing 10Ks, but I was doing them every day. So because I was doing them every day, I was coming in at around about leisurely sort of just under an hour, but not by a lot. So maybe like 58 minutes, 59 minutes. And so my wife, like, she found it hilarious. But I was just like, you know what, I'm going to start going for my 10K at 7 p.m. Right. So that's what I did. So I was coming down the main street in Kilburn, just as everyone else was pots and pans in. I was literally running like that, just putting my arms out running. And a couple of my neighbours found it funny. Like the lad across the road found it like hilarious. But others were, here he is again. But I thought it was funny, you know, just coming in and taking the plaudits at 8 p.m. for all these people, pots and pans. But it goes to show what you can condition people to do.
Yeah.
You know, it's like that 1984, having everyone all screaming at the same time. It's the same thing, isn't it?
The 2 minutes of hate. And
yeah. But that's what it was, wasn't it? It was like, yeah, come out and clap at nothing. And everyone did.
And the double speak as well, social distancing.
Yeah. Totally that.
Yeah.
Totally that.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. It was horrendous. Like in our local village, I mean, we were lucky because we're rural. I got friends that lived in the city and it was hell for them. But because we were rural, you might get a police van once a month and it was always for the same two knobheads that lived above the shop. Apart from that, you don't really see the police. So people just kind of got on with it. And so the council put the tape around the play park, which I ripped off, and then they put it again, and then another dad ripped it off. It's like, I'm putting my kid on a swing, mate. And then they never bothered again. So we had a bit of a different vibe where we were lucky. And, you know, we had people around the house and we were sat out in the garden drinking beer and all the neighbours were all doing the same, like whatever. But mates that lived in the city, that lived in flats, that didn't have gardens, mate, like, you know. And the thing that annoyed me was that they weren't really rules, they weren't laws. That everything was guidance. All right, well, I don't adhere to your guidance, thanks, bye.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all you needed to do, really. And so I had like a friend who was really struggling with depression. He'd struggled with depression for a long time, and I was worried about him, really. And so I said to him, just come around the house. He's like, I can't. And I was like, do you feel depressed? He was like, yeah, I'm really struggling. I went, but I have a fear for your life then. Yeah. So get your son on a bike and get yourself around the house. And he did. And he'd come round and we're all sat in the garden drinking beer and it's fine. It's like, that's all it took, was just to go, there's an excuse for this.
Yeah.
You shouldn't have to create an excuse. You should better come around whenever you want. But if it makes you feel better, there was always an excuse for everything. And I was like, you know, I was like that with the masks and all that stuff. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing that.
Never wore one.
No,
I'm not having
it.
Not having it.
And it was like, where's your mask? I don't wear them. Why not? I'm exempt.
That's all it took.
They haven't. That is a simple. And I mean, I flew all over the place. I were away as much during COVID than I normally am. I went all over the place. I went to Tenerife 4 times, and they had curfews there, but I got pulled with the police out there, and just said I'm exempt.
Yeah, but there was a smelling of fear to that I saw. I must admit.
Yeah,
like
definitely.
I remember the one example of it. Me and my brother were filming down in Wiltshire near Stonehenge, and we walked into a Sainsbury's, I think, whatever. And there's a lady in front of us got a mask on, And she steps forward, she puts the stuff on the counter, and this proper little job's worth. She's like, can you step back from the counter, please? She's like, oh, steps back. So obviously me and Jay just stood there without masks on, so I just looked at Jay and went, this is going to get spicy. And so then she clears off, we go up, hello, mate. I'm like overly like obnoxious, bang, 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 we'll play, don't, not a word, out. And you're like, but she had a mask on, but you barked at her for being too close. Yet we're two lads right here without one, but you won't say anything. And it's like that energy you put out there. And I remember my wife was in my ear about it. She was like, no one ever asks you. It's all right for you, basically. No one ever asks you. I was like, I don't know why. They just don't. And then we were taking my little and Alora were taking her ice skating. So we stood in the queue and, you know, you've got your ticket on your phone and all that sort of nonsense. Everyone's masked up apart from me and my wife. And so he comes down. He's like, says to the guy in front of me, he's like, can you pull that over your nose, please? So the guy's like, sorry. So I've looked at Gemma, I'm thinking, like, Gemma, you might just get your wish now, love. You might just get me questioned here. Here we go. So I went, all right, mate. And he went, all right, yeah, boop. And he walks off and Gemma's literally like, what is going on? It's like, but it's an air. And it's not like a big guy air, because the lad in front of me was a bigger lad than me. It's just having that kind of, I'm going to put this out into the universe that this is my line. And I'm not crossing it, no matter what. Yeah. That's it. Because I find that so many people go, well, I'm not going to wear a mask unless... Oh, you're going to wear one then? Yeah. It's the same with the vaccine. Well, I won't get jabbed unless you're going to get jabbed then. Yeah. Because they're going to create the unless if you give them that option, you know.
So as a vaccinated person, you are still wearing a mask. What's the thought process there?
I mean, at this point, it's just become a natural habit. So it's like every day just put it on. Because I do it it's been, a year now? So it's just a force of habit.
And so, like, when our second child was born, it was during the COVID nonsense, right? And Derby was pretty bad for it. The hospital was pretty well known for being bad for it. Like my brother he had his second child like 3 weeks before ours. He got booted out of the hospital for refusing to wear a mask. And the irony is the guy's like hella asthmatic, so he couldn't even wear one even if he wanted to, you know. Yeah. But they booted him out. And so like my wife was saying to me, what are you going to do? Because we're going into hospital, because we were on consultant care because my wife had acute spina bifida. So it wasn't a case of a home birth. There was a potential that there could be an issue. So it was like, okay, we kind of got to do it in hospital. Unfortunately, would rather it was much more natural at home, but whatever. And I just said, I'm not wearing one. That's the rule. And so the chips will fall where they may, but I'm not doing it. But at the same time, I'm not missing the birth of my child. So there's a hoop potentially going to be jumped through by someone, but it ain't going to be me, was my attitude. And I went in there, was never asked once, couldn't have been more friendly, couldn't have been more lovely, absolutely amazing. And then they tried to, and I was going in, back to the car, getting stuff, coming, blah, blah, you know what, nothing, no one ever said a word the whole time. But what I found interesting, actually, was they wanted to test my wife. They wanted to give her a test. Now, I've never had a test, and neither's my wife. But they wanted to do it for her, like, we want to test you. And so she said, well, and it's true, she's got like this little like benign sort of tumour thing in her nose. And she said, well, so she just kind of skirted around the truth. So as far as they were concerned, she had one in both nostrils. She was like, well, you can whack it in there if you like, but it will bleed everywhere, just to let you know. And the lady went, oh, really? She was like, yeah, I've got like, you can, like, if you look up my nostril, you can just see it. And the lady went, oh, right, okay. And that was the end of it, didn't do it. But never asked me. So my wife said to me, she said, why do they didn't want to test you then? But they want to test me. And I sort of sat there and I was thinking, because you're a hospital admission. That's why. Because you're an admission to hospital. If you test positive, you're a COVID hospital admission. Whereas I'm not. I'm just a visitor. So in terms of the stats, there's a lady in hospital in Derby with COVID. Nailed it. Whereas with me, do you know what I mean? There's a lad sat in Costa with COVID. It don't sound the same. And it's like, that's exactly how they were manipulating it. And then it makes me then think to, you know, Bill Gates, because they always tell us, I believe that they have to. I'm a firm believer in that, you know, the old stories of vampires that they can rip your head off, but you got to invite them in. Yeah. And I feel like that there is some truth in that in a way, you know, that they have to tell you what they're doing, and then you, by not saying no to it, consent to it, and as soon as you consent to it, good luck, son, you know.
I hope they can breathe. One more, bring anything down in super spreaders. I bet you voted for Trump, didn't ya? Woo! Trumpers! Woo! Yeah, they don't We can cover business! Woo!
And so Bill Gates was sat there in 2020 talking about his 5 books to read that year, and How to Lie with Statistics was the top book. And you're like, oh, mate, he's trolling. He's trolling, you know. And I think they are trolling a lot. And I think, do you know what? If I was evil and twisted and I was in their position, I'd definitely be trolling too. Just to wind people up. And I think that's what they're doing. They do. And, you know, they did lie with statistics, unbelievably.
Certainly did.
A positive test and you know, what was it? One county in state of Colorado, it was 2 out of 5 COVID deaths had gunshot wounds.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
just says it all, doesn't it? But that's what they do. They changed the meaning of what a pandemic was just before. That's what they do. They just move the goalposts around, and you know, it's staggering the level of deceit. And I think that's what people struggled with the most. It's that whole kind of, I mean, I think it's attributed to Hitler. I don't know if he even did say it, but it's attributed to him, that quote of like, make the lie big and keep repeating it.
Go big or go home.
Yeah, because the bigger the lie, the more people will actually believe it, because actually they will almost come with a mindset of, well, they wouldn't make it that up because that's just too, you know. So that's what they did. They created such a huge lie that people couldn't compute the fact that they would go that big. Honestly, I think it's something that, you know, my kids, maybe my kids will look back at the people that acquiesced and the people that pushed it with an attitude of what the hell. Like it's just coming out now, isn't it? I've seen it, quite a big trend of it on social media. People are retweeting and resharing videos from 2020 of people being attacked for not wearing a mask and all these things that happened. Very much as a kind of hashtag never forget sort of vibe. And, you know, I remember them at the time, but even now watching some of them back again, you are like, oh mate, the people lost their minds.
Yeah.
And actually you look back at some of the things that were done over history, whether it be, you know, freaking Maoist China or, you know, Pol Pot or whatever. How did they ever do that? And then you look at some of the attitudes that were happening around COVID and you're like, oh mate, that's how you do that. You know,